Thank you for joining the afternoon session of Teal Around the World. We have now entered the fifth hour of this 30-hour program. So I hope you still have your coffee, you have had enjoyed your lunches, and you've made some amazing connections as well throughout the day. So thank you for joining us. This session is about the flower power in the digital age. And I just really want to casually introduce our guest here. Cherry and I used to work for DSM together a couple of years ago, and I have had the privilege to experience part of this digital transformation at its very early stages. And I must say, I continue to be a fan of what DSM is doing for our environment and for our planet, and also for the people at DSM. So with that, I really believe that Sherry is going to drop a few things that will help us to reflect on how do we take people along in the journey for the digital change. So with that, I will just do a little bit of housekeeping. We are a small group here, so we will entertain some questions. And for that, I'm gonna invite you to join me in Menti. So I'm gonna pop a Menti link on the chat. And if you can just add your questions, your thoughts your thoughts, please do it here on chat. But if any questions come up, let's try and upvote there so that I can pick them up and bring them to Thierry for the conversation later on. And so with that, I hand over to you, Thierry. Enjoy.
Thank you, Rhea. So the topic here is about the digital transformation, and the question we had is this transformation feasible in the standard way we were doing transformation in the past? And the thing we say, most probably we need to rethink a little bit the structure to drive such a transformation, which is quite heavy and quite fundamental and impacting, all the people in the company. So, and the whole thing started with two things, one fact and one belief. The fact first is we are territorial. And, the recent history kind of confirms that human beings are territorial. The other was a belief, say, the nature of this transformation is a bit different from what we had before. And most probably it needs the IT department to have perhaps a bit of a different structure to make it a success. So let's go first to the first thing. We are territorial, aren't we? And an IT department in a hierarchical model is territorial. So either you are IT or you're not IT. So if you're IT, you are part of the people giving access and creating application. If you are not part of IT, then you should not be developing applications, should you? So that is what we had and what we still have to some extent. Say, but digital is a bit of a different beast, and the border is not as clear. So how do we handle that? How do we go to, IT being a very well-defined territory to we need to digitalize the business together with all the entire ecosystem and all the people. So that's a bit the question we had. And then to make it very simple, if the IT territory is at the center, that's where the IT group is, and they develop and they create the infrastructure and they give authorization or not, then they have a thin layer, which is basically the interface between these techies and the business world. That's what we have. And that's the first stumbling blocks. So we are territorial. What are we going to do about it? The second element, and that was the belief, and the belief is we can't be successful in this digital transformation if only the IT crew plus a few early adopters learn to thrive in the digital world. That's not good enough. And if that's not good enough, what are we going to do? The element which underpin this belief is, in today's world, an organization like DSM, 25,000 people, 400 people in the IT department, we are not equipped anymore to deal with the pace at which the change are coming. the times where Microsoft were changing their system every 3 years and you could train the people is over. Not Microsoft is basically, releasing new functionality every week. So this traditional way of supporting the business people is no more working by having a traditional hierarchical type of model. The other element, imagine you are the logistics manager in a manufacturing plant in Costa Rica and you have inefficiencies. But what's the likelihood that your little problem in Costa Rica, which is a fraction of the business, will make it to the top of the list of projects we want to do at DSM? I can tell you, close to zero. Close to zero. So if you are this logistic manager in Costa Rica, if I make this take example, you have two choices. Live with your inefficiencies or do something yourself. So that was basically a bit underpinning the idea. We have to do it a bit different. Let me first sketch a bit the very simple roadmap we had for the digital transformation. No rocket science. It's about transforming three elements. It's about transforming the business, the workforce, and the mindset. The workforce or the business is what I believe all companies are doing currently. Using digital to optimize your current business and processes. The second element is using digital to create new business channels by creating ecosystems, by selling and monetizing data, you name it. So that's what every company is doing. So what is digital enabling me to do and enabling my business to become? But by doing so, you involve, again, the 1,000 people, 2,000 people. What are you going to do with the other 28,000 if you're 30,000? And that's where the rest comes in. And that's where we've done some work on, we need to also look at how can we basically create a workforce which is digitally savvy. And secondly, how do we get this digital mindset in the head of 25,000 people? And for us, the definition of a digital mindset is very simple. It's the willingness to learn more and more often and try more and more often with digital. If we achieve to do that, then the digital transformation will be a huge success. And yes, we still have to do the red part. But if we want really to go beyond of the red part, which every company is doing, we need to mobilize much more people in learning, but also trying and using all the digital ecosystem they have around them and they're currently not using. So that was say, okay, how do we do that? And say, okay, we need to launch, that was the idea. We need to launch a movement. And this can't be a top-down thing. This needs to be a bottom-up. How can we launch the movement where people suddenly want to learn and try digital? And we came up with, a process and say, okay, the digital movement should be an invitation for every employee to learn, ideate, prototype solutions which are helping them wherever they are and whatever they do by using digital. And we say, and this campaign should be very simple. We will basically launch it in a certain location. And this will be 4-5 steps. The first step is, let's make sure that we offer training so that people can learn what is data visualization. What is low-code, no-code type of application, which enables to do kind of a do-it-yourself. How can we use the office of automation we have on our desktops? So offer learning and then ask the people, know that you know what is available on your desktop. What are you going to do about it? What's your ID? How can you improve what you're currently doing, what your team is doing, what your department is doing? Maybe you have even an idea on how to improve the business you are part of. Should it be human nutritional health, animal nutritional health, whatever? So learn, try to apply your learning and come up with an idea, and then we'll look at the best idea. And the best ideas will help you. We don't leave you alone. We'll help you to make a prototype. And these prototypes will be pitched to a group of senior leaders. And the senior leaders will kind of look at it and say, excellent, maybe tweak it. Some of you might need funds, and that's where it's going to happen. Or some of you might get also the answer, I don't believe this is going to help whatever we do at DSM. So that was basically a very simple campaign that we wanted to launch. But then the question is, how do we launch such a campaign bottom up so that it becomes a success? Because the idea is simple, but how do we launch it and make it a success? And there are a few elements I want to share with you, which I believe made it a success. And I show the figures of what we achieved just after. The first thing we had to ask ourselves is, how do we create the space for many DSM people to learn and experiment and want to do so? Yeah, it's something to experiment, to offer it, but how can we incentivize people to basically want to do it? And that two elements which I believe made us successful. The first one is we said we need to lower the threshold to participate. And that means it can't be a global initiative. Because again, if I take my example of this logistic manager in Costa Rica, but it could also be a marketer in China, or it could be a production manager in North America, it could be a customer care people in Europe, whatever. The threshold to participate to a global campaign is substantially higher than if it is happening in your region or country. It is also substantially more complicated to do it in English when your native language is Portuguese, Spanish, French, German, Chinese. So we say, let's make it as local as we can, and let's launch this campaign regionally. So we launched it in Latin America with a special launch for Brazil and the rest for the other countries which were kind of Spanish speaking. We did the same in India, we did the same in China, we did the same in Japan. So lowering the threshold to participate and having local people organizing it for local people was a key element to, have people participating and wanting to do so. The other thing is, in orange type of company like DSM, it's still very hierarchical. A bit less than, some other companies, but still the hierarchy, and people look at their managers, and in some culture even more than in others. So we had to make sure that explicit and implicit authorization was given to the people to dedicate time to learn and dedicate time to basically try things out without having the impression that this is a waste of time or I'm not authorized. So a key element was to convince all the senior leaders in a given region we were launching it to support it and to support it explicitly. So that was one element. The second element is there is one story I could tell to the employees and another story I needed to tell to the leaders, because the reason for them to either sponsor or participate are different. Where the upskilling part and keeping or increasing your market value is working for the employees, not all leaders see that as a priority. So the value thing was the key hook, which worked with most of the senior leaders, saying, look, if you help me to launch that in your region, there will be some value generated for your team, department, business unit. So that's the dual message I had to juggle with to make sure that it's about not creating value on only one end, on the personal end of an employee, but it's also about creating value at the company level. So I think that's the two key elements which I believe was really helping to get the full thing running. Now, if you look at it, what we've done is we had this top-down element. How can we use digital to create customer intimacy? How can we use digital to improve operational efficiency? How can we use digital to create new business model and ecosystem? That's all what the company are doing. And yes, we have projects which have started as a consequence. And on the other hand, we had this more bottom-up intrapreneurship. That's what it is. So we created bottom-up digital intrapreneurship, where a number of ideas were generated and some became projects and some died, which is good. So let me show you a bit what we achieved. So at the end, so 1.5 years after, we have created a community, and this community is at the heart of making what I just said a reality. It's 450 people spread over the globe. This is not a global project. This is not steered from the headquarters. We just designed the principle and convinced regional teams to take it and make it a reality in Japan, in Costa Rica, in Brazil, in Germany, sometimes just in one site if we have big sites. So we have these 450 digital guides. These are business people. This could be a customer care person. This could be an accountant. This could be a controller. This could be a logistics person. This could be a chemical engineer. This could be a researcher. This could be a secretary. This could be anybody. The only thing that these people have in common is two elements. They're interested by digital and they are wanting to learn and help others. That's what they have in common. But this is not an IT crew. And this ranges from somebody having 5% of his time or her time to 20%. So these are people who invest 5 to 20% of their time to make what I will just show happen. So these 450 guides, which are spread over the globe, and the different functions and businesses did two things. One is this digital intrapreneurship I just mentioned. They were here to basically enable the rest of their colleagues to learn, ideate, to help them to prototype, and to help them to pitch it to a group of senior leaders. And the second thing is some people say, we are more at ease in learning ourselves, every new thing which comes up and trying to bring that in our unit, helping other to also become good at using digital. So let me share you a few figures on what we achieved. The first thing is we launched that process and campaign in 5 regions, and we had 5 set of digital committees. So that's the most senior leaders in these regions which were supporting it. They were launching it, as you could see, and they were basically here in the selection process, but also in the pitching and listening to the prototype and whether we should go beyond the prototype. In total, 500 ideas roughly. We created roughly 100 prototypes, and a bit, below 50 of these prototypes became solutions which are used. So that's one element. The other element is the workplace adoption. As I said, our workplace is constantly evolving, and also our need is constantly evolving. Certainly, we need to work hybrid. Suddenly, Microsoft issues a new tool. So how are we going to spread that knowledge and information to 25,000 people? Through the 450 digital guides. And I can tell you it makes a huge difference. And why makes it a huge difference? Because these guides have a business background and they bring context. So again, an example, imagine that an accountant just learned about data visualization, Power BI, whatever. Not only he or she learned something, but when he or she brings it back to his or her department, they will not speak about data visualization. They will say, oh, I learned something new, which is super interesting in my finance context. Or if it's a logistics so he already or she translates, this is a tool, but that's how I translate it in a business context. This is far more efficient than any trainer, which is going to give a generic example, because he needs to give a generic example, because in the audience, there are financial people, logistics people, production people. So he needs to be generic. These people are non-generic by definition. They are part of a certain business. And when they learn, they put it in the context. And that's how they bring it much more efficiently to the rest of the people. And a few figures here also. Obviously, they were not creating. So we have a group of people creating content. Yeah, and we have 8 learning journey. A learning journey is learning to working out loud, leveraging your personal network. How can you use digital to do that? That's the type of journey. A toolkit is how to run better meetings, how to work hybrid. So toolkits which enable people who need to work hybrid or have a distributed team to have all the use cases and tools that can do it. Or we have more simple things like bite-sized learning, which is just helping you to use a specific functionality that just came out from Microsoft. The key element is that's the content, but the magic is happening when these 450 people understand what it is and spread it. And we are pretty proud of having reached 50% of the 25,000 users. It's very complicated to reach 25,000 people in DSM. And we reached in less than 2 years to 50%. 50% of all the population basically went to our SharePoint site and start learning a few elements. Should it be the toolkit, a bite-size, learning journey, whatever? The other thing we achieved is 80% of the leaders were engaged. So because we say we also need to engage the middle management. And the last one, which we're pretty proud about, is, Yammer is the internal social media that Microsoft is powering. And we moved from 40% to 88% usage. So 88% of all the user population is using internal social media to share, to celebrate, to learn from others. And I say others, from people they sometimes don't know, because that's the whole beauty of the platform. Using internal social media enables you to learn from somebody you don't know, but has a solution you need. So that's a little bit what we achieved so far. So now I say, okay, so what? And coming back to my first idea, how do we integrate that? So we have currently these 450 digital guides. Pick. Potentially we move them to 1,000. Not a bad idea. But somehow they are, doing something that the traditional IT tried to do too. So, remember this territorial. So how do we avoid then the rejection? And by the way, I'm part of the digital organization, but I'm very aware that to some extent there is a competition now. And I basically start sharing that with my IT colleagues and say, look, the left model is what we have. Obviously we have our engineers, they design the workplace and they, create the network and enable us to work in a good way. And then we have you, the first line, the people who are supposed to support 25,000 people. And by the way, you're only 40 to 50. You know that. Yeah, that's an issue. But we all know that we're not going to double it, do we? Yeah, we know that we're not going to double the manpower. So we're going to stay 40 and 50 people to support 25,000 people. And we try to do our best and say, okay. And say, yeah, but now we have these 450 people. Yeah, we have the 450 people. And I say, if I would draw that in that thing, that would be the second green layer. How do you feel about that? I say, So basically, you want to put, Thierry, something in between us and the user? Is that what you try to tell us? And say, yeah, it doesn't feel good, does it? And they say, no, that doesn't feel good. So that's the best recipe for rejection. So say, but what are we going to do then? And that's where basically you might understand why my title is the flower power, because that's what I came up with, and it just looked like a flower. And say, we need to integrate, ladies and gentlemen. We need to integrate this group into our IT organization. We can't just leave them at the edge or being supported by me and my project team for the rest of the decade. So we need to find a way to integrate what you are doing and what these people are doing, and look at this as an extension of what you do and as a platform which is going to double the positive impact that we can have on the user, double it. And I just made a simple calculation. If you have 1,000 digital guides, if they spend 5% of their time helping their colleagues, this is roughly another 40 to 50 FTEs. That's what it is. So instead of battling against them, what about us nurturing them? What about us understanding that part of our job is to recruit more guides, nurture them so that they can help us to do exactly what we want to do, which is giving a top-notch support and enabling every user to feel super comfortable with the digital workplace, which is evolving all the time, so that we get in this modus. So that basically was my proposition, and that created some resonance in the organization that, instead of just trying to do something in parallel, can we play a role in nurturing and developing the community? That would be then becoming part of our duties. And if you extend that, say, yeah, but is that just in your specific case here, these digital guides? And I say, I don't think so. We have many of these communities with exactly the same problematic. We have citizen developers. Again, we could let them do, and we develop our stuff. Is that where the future should go? Certainly not. That's the best recipe for chaos. We have data scientists. Yeah, and whether we like it or not, as a data scientists are not only in IT. We have some in research. We have some in logistics. We have some in marketing and sales. Again, how are we going to nurture and work together with this community at the edge of the hierarchical organization? How are we going to mix networks with hierarchies? That's a little bit where we stand. And I would be lying if I said that's an easy game. So there are a few stumbling blocks. The first one I just explained is how are we going to integrate that in our operating model, that the IT department feels this is part of my duty to basically nurture and help this community to grow. This is not a competition. This is us helping each other. But that means also that we need to have time. Are we having somebody which is appointed officially and his job or her job is going to be, oh, I'm managing the community of citizen developer? Yeah, because that's what we would need. Leaving citizen developer alone is not a good idea. Telling them what they should do is neither a good idea, or closing down citizen developer is neither a good idea. But say, okay, can we have a group of people in the digital organization which are driving and nurturing the community so that it goes in the right direction? Also, when an application becomes too critical, to say, hey, dear citizen developer, maybe you need to give us the baby so that you can develop the next application, because your application becomes too critical to sit on your personal account. The entire manufacturing side is now relying on your application. So give it to us, we'll run it for you. You can focus on the next application you want to develop. But if we are not integrated, this is not going to happen. And a next war or territorial thing is going to happen. So we need to think about how do we integrate this community at the edge. Should it be citizen developer, data scientist, digital guides, and whatever else will appear in the future? So that's a little bit where we are. And then, I'm just going to close before question on something like, flowers, we all agree are beautiful, are touching, and our senses, and they have power, but they're also very fragile. Yeah. So the question is, what would I believe need more to make that a success? And the answer I came up with is, I think I would need a bit more teal in our organization. I still feel a bit lonely in driving this type of initiatives. The old ways of running organization is still very, very present. We have a few dots. I've seen some people speaking about, teal dots. We have a few teal dots in DSM, that's for sure. But I think we would need a little bit more to accelerate. Thank you for listening, and I'm more than happy to answer any question.
Thank you so much, Thierry. And maybe let's have a view of everyone in the room. We can stop the sharing and let's try to see everybody. I have a few questions on Menti, actually, which is quite cool. And I'm going to just ask the first one. The story is fantastic. I see a red thread of the evolution from when I was part of the organization to where you have actually reached 2 years down the road. And it makes me proud. And I have one question here, and it's about handling the resistance. So where there's some people who said, we really don't want to be part of this movement and this change, and how was it handled?
Okay, so the first thing, obviously, on the people side, it was an invite. It was certainly not you have to participate. It was all set up as an invite from global. But what was much more efficient is regional leaders were inviting people to participate, and because this implicit or explicit, you are allowed to spend time to learn. Once you learn something, look at how you can use low-code, no-code applications in whatever you do. And we are willing to hear your stories. We are willing to watch your prototypes. Please participate. So it was a real invite and not, let's do that. On the senior leader side, I mentioned it before, is just, even so, I think it's our accountability as companies to make sure that our people stay relevant And we believe at DSM that staying relevant means you need to become good at digital, whatever position you have in the future. So we have a feel and accountability to make sure that people learn. But not all leaders believe so. That is so important. So the resistance I had to manage on the senior leadership side was rather, what's in it for us as a company? How is it contributing to the profit? So the argument which I had to develop was the value part. And let me not say what I didn't say. Some people were worried by the employability and were really hooked by, oh, that's positive because we have this accountability. But some other leaders, I don't say I couldn't care less, but that was not their prime interest. But when I was talking about the value we could generate, that was resonating. So that's the two ways so different ways from the two different categories of key people.
Yeah, I know it's not always easy, and I've been there. How did you convince management to run these experiments? Because I can imagine when this digital guides idea was sparked, it was kind of like, a bit clunky, but then the more you support, put more fuel into it, and I guess that's I'm just curious, how did you convince management to support this and continue with it?
The first thing was, remember the chart? Say, okay, it's about the transforming the business and the workforce and the mindset. This was endorsed from a concept at the highest level. So we have to do the work on the three elements. And by the way, Thierry, can you develop something for the last part? Yeah. So obviously, I needed the green light from a group of people which were, appointed from the business and which were kind of the sounding board for the digital transformation. So the first thing I had to sell was, I'm going to launch a movement, and are you okay with that? And they were overwhelming okay with that. An interesting reason for that is the budget I requested, and the budget I requested beside of myself was zero. So all I've done was based on goodwill. And I knew that I could do that because I've done that before on driving, a transformation from a culture point of view. I know that you can just do things based on goodwill if what you want to do is positive for the people you want to involve. So the other reason that I got the green light, I believe, is my request for budget was zero. I don't need any money. I potentially need money when we want to scale, but then you will see the prototype, and if you like it, you can put money on it. And then I got off a kind of a wild card, do something. Yeah. Anyway, it's not costing anything. And once the first community in Latin America, I must say I tried Latin America because I know these guys are enthusiastic. And then I was building on the success of Latin America to convince all the other regions. That was also my direction.
Yeah. I think it's fairly clear that you have successfully convinced senior management and senior leadership to support this change and to maybe even be a sponsor or a loud megaphone for this change to happen. How did you have to quantify this value, or how was it? I mean, coming from an orange background,
yep,
I can imagine there's a quantification needed to justify scaling.
Absolutely. So the first element was basically the number of, so we had a few metrics, was the number of IDs, the number of prototypes, and the number of solutions. Where I had to walk a thin line was on the value thing, because everybody from the senior leaders, they were speaking about scaling. That's what the interest is. How can we scale? Where I say, for me, the value we generate is just a byproduct. Yeah. For me, the byproduct is we create digital solution. But the real reason we do it is to create this digital mindset, to change the way people engage with digital from I wait that somebody tells me to get trained to I'm looking constantly on what's on the market and how it can help me to do what I have to do. That's the real value. That's difficult to quantify, but that's far superior compared to the value of this 46 application, far superior. So I had to work this thin line between say, okay, look, this value we generate is just the byproduct. The real value is that people start on a regular basis to learn and try new things by themselves. That's far superior than anything you want to scale. And I had to say, yeah, but we need to scale. Say, yes, we need to scale. But before scaling, let me just create the movement. The scaling element will come, but not now. Because if you come with the most important is to scale, you're going to kill it. You're going to kill the movement. Yeah, then we go back to the traditional thing. So give us time to first get this mindset, and then let's think about other ways or ways to scale. So that's a bit the thin line I had to walk. I'm still walking, by the way.
I can imagine. Well, I see Richard's hand, and you must be tired from raising your hand for a long time now, Richard. So I'm just going to hand over to you for your question.
Thank you, Rhea. It's the advantage of the digital age that you don't get tired by raising a virtual hand. But thank you for your presentation, Thierry. Well done, well presented and enlivening. In my book, Going from Orange, where you take power on information, you keep information for yourself, and you go to a digital age where you share information and you collaborate with people. This is, for me, a shift from orange to green and going to the max of what you can get there about sharing, being transparent, being collaborative. So I was puzzled to hear what you mean at the last slide. You say, I would like to get some more teal in the company. So I'm not attached. I can say getting more Scrum and agility and more digital is a step towards teal. But what is your meaning about teal? When I hear teal, autonomy, self-governance, and things like that. What would be the teal scene of the digital age? Or are you at the max, at the top in what you did?
I always felt there is a kind of a glass ceiling, which is difficult to break. So my belief is we need to be able to change the mind at the top of the company. That's my biggest challenge. So let's say the top 300 is very much attached to the model which brought them to the top. So so this is the hurdle we have whenever we try something new. So that's what I mean with more teal, is that people understand that the self-organized type of elements are as valuable as the thing we can really measure. Because I still feel what can't be measured doesn't have value. How do I measure now the fact that I reach 2,000 people in my movement and they are changing their mindset when it comes to learning new stuff? How do I put any money behind that? Compared to a traditional project, we say, oh, yeah, we are going to implement a CRM system, or we're going to create, a new web shop which will drive growth. Here very easily you put money, turnover, EBITDA margin, blah, 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 and you have a cost, you have a value. I'm a bit stuck when I have to compete with such initiatives. The only way to get more attention is if more senior people understand that this is also value, even though I cannot measure it as nicely as the other type of project I do. And this needs a mindset shift. This needs it needs a belief in a different type of organization, different type of systems. Even the hybrid thing, I think, helped us a lot, or the pandemic, I think, helped us a lot, isn't it? I can tell you in the discussion many senior leaders had a very, very, very strong belief that people working at home are less efficient than people at work. After pandemic happened and a lot of research happened, and they kind of, heard, oh, the problem is not that the people are working less, but that the people are working too much. that made change their mind. But we can't hope for a pandemic each time to change the mind of people, can we? So that's what I mean. It doesn't. So Thiel didn't reach the top of many companies, also because people are attached to their model and they feel comfortable. And by the way, they are very occupied, rightfully so or not, but they're very, very so getting any airtime to do that is complicated.
Thank you,
Thierry.
Tim. I hope, Richard, that answers your question, or at least gave you some perspective of the thinking behind it. We still have 15 minutes, and I'm really happy to see many, many questions coming up. So, Thierry, there's one question about tackling the motivation, and there is not enough resources to work on, and this kind of like, when your engagement drops, and those ideas. How are you, from a change standpoint, detecting this and also tackling it and addressing it?
I think one way is putting yourself in the shoes of the people. So why would anybody become a little guide? And understanding perhaps also the essence of human beings. One reason, and I mentioned it, why people join is because they like helping. The only thing they need is receiving kind of implicit or explicit authorization. Oh, you can use some of your 40 hours to help the others because this is okay. So I think helping others is one of the most unrated element in human beings. People love to help each other. If we set up structures where people can help each other instead of fighting against each other, this is going to work because human beings love to help each other. So by what we've done here is we just created a structure where people could do exactly what they wanted to do, help each other. So there is no resistance in helping each other. So that's one element. Now, indeed, resistance you can tackle in many ways, but I always take this picture. What we tend to do is and put the picture of a donkey in your mind now. So this donkey which don't want to move. Yeah, that's for me the archetype of the resistance. And what we see people doing is when the donkey is not moving, they are pushing and pulling the donkey. Yeah, that's what 90% of the people do. When the donkey is not moving, they just try to push and pull the donkey so that it goes in the direction they want to go. What a few people do, which is substantially smarter, is to understand why the donkey is not moving. Yeah. So why is somebody not wanting to learn? Whereby you say, this is strange. Why would somebody not want to learn? What is blocking? So we ask ourselves, what is blocking? And what was blocking is, no authorization. That's one element. Yeah, my boss doesn't value it. No time. I have no time. So we say, yeah, but how do you tackle the no time? It's look, by learning, you're not going to lose time. You're going to invest in winning time. So you need to understand why are people not wanting, and then you can either implement something which is enabling them. So, we were using a few systems. You remember we had this X time layer. Yes. So this is an explicit authorization for people to apply for a job outside of their job for X%. It could be a 20%, it could be a 40%, and any department say, I'm looking for somebody to help me in that and that and that. Yeah. So that also, helps to basically create, this is an opportunity for me to do something different, and I have authorization for doing it. And others, sometimes it's just a discussion. You're not going to lose time. People saying, I have no time, say, I'm not proposing you to lose time. I'm proposing you to win time. But you need to invest. It's like money. You need to invest a little bit, and then what the result will be, you will have more time afterwards. And that was also convincing a few people. So, but keep the donkey in mind. You need to understand why the donkey is not moving. Mm-hmm. And then you might be successful in your tactics to convince people.
Yeah. Thanks, Thierry. I perfectly remember X time because that's how I got in touch with Kelly Hall from Niaga, who's also going to be in the next session after this one in Garden One. Yeah, so I'm just curious, and I think some of you are also curious, and I see this in one of the questions. From the donkey, let's move to this engaged group of people called the digital guides. Like, did you notice if there's anything that is common, that is like, oh, there is a recurring theme and a pattern, or a kind of like characteristic of the people who are putting their hand up to become digital guides? And how are you kind of leveraging that for the organization?
Yeah. So the commonality, I mentioned it before. There's two commonalities. One, they're not afraid of technology. So yeah, they're not afraid. That's one thing. One thing to learn. So I see these people are more at ease in terms of continuous learning than the average. That's the second characteristic. The third, they're all very eager to help their peers. That's the three. And how to leverage that is to say, we said, you are the type of people we would like to have more. If you look at what we want to achieve, is if we want to go on, we need people to rely substantially more on themselves to learn, because who else than yourself knows what you want and need to learn? Certainly not your boss. Yeah, certainly not your boss. So how can we trigger that? So share, not only share and help, whatever digital, because that's what you do, but at the meta level, you can also kind of promote your way of being a DSM, your way of, continuously learning, your way of continually spreading and helping the others, not only spread the content, which is digital in that case, but also the way you basically start behaving. So we start also promoting not only what they do, but who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really love that that you mentioned, like, this is kind of a personal approach, right, to kind of creating that environment and safe space for people to kind of like, hey, I can put my hand up for this and it's safe enough for me to try. And I can imagine that when you tried localizing this against the backdrop of, well, culture and history within DSM, what were the elements that you said, like, okay, we were super successful in localizing it, and what were the elements that you thought, like, hey, but there has to be some alignment on a global direction for this? How did you kind of mindfully choose the governance between the local, because what you don't want is like, you cannot understand anymore the language and it has evolved into a message that is not in sync with where the organization is going.
So the way we organized was to say, okay, so the concept we've developed with a group of people, that was, when I go to Greenlight, okay, what's the concept? Okay, a movement. Okay, what should be? Okay, a campaign. Okay, what are the steps? Okay, that's the step in the campaign. And then the first thing, say, okay, if we want to be successful, we have first to localize at whatever global cost, between bracket, at whatever global cost. So if it's not fully aligned globally, at the end, I prefer a movement to start, which is slightly different than what I imagined, rather than not to start. Yeah. So I had to make compromise, because suddenly people say, oh yeah, we're doing it a bit differently. Okay, do it differently. So basically giving the authorization, say, no, you have to do it that way. No, this is the concept, make it yours. And I very, let's say, consciously made the decision, I prefer them to do something different than not doing anything. Remember, this is just based on goodwill. Nobody reported to me. None of the 15 people in LATAM who launched it reported to me, zero. So the only way to get it launched was say, let it make them their story. Yeah. My role was just to say, can I get a group of people in each and every region who understand the concept and take it and localize it? I would be lying if I say, yeah, but would that complicate it? your role in kind of gathering the 500 IDs and avoiding that we have duplicate? Oh yeah, because suddenly the IDs were in Chinese and I don't understand a single word of Chinese. So it's more complicated for us globally to bring it together again, which we are trying now to do. But if I would have pushed the global side too much, I would have no movement at all. So it was a very conscious decision. Okay, let's compromise, and this time I'm going to compromise on the standard and global element of it. If people learn more and try more, that's all I want. Yeah, that potentially I cannot scale a certain superb application because I don't have a clue because it's all written in Chinese. Let's take that risk.
Yeah. Thanks, Thierry. And I think it's really something that you have to be mindful, right? Not to kill a movement, but allow ideas to kind of bubble from the surface. So thanks for that thought. There's a few interests around your idea pipeline. Can you share? I mean, I know of the Clean Cow program is one of the things that came from an idea pipeline and it's our product. Is there anything that you can share more?
Oh yeah, these are not kind of big 1 billion type of ideas which come up, but these are ideas which have the potential to be scaled. So, for instance, one simple idea was, we have an ID box on SHE IDs. How can we improve the safety, health, and environment in a specific site? This was a paper box type of ID box, and the very simple solution is, we're just going to make it digital, because then we don't have to transcribe it in Excel. We don't have to inform the person that the idea has been taken into consideration. All that stuff, and the people just develop it from scratch, using low code, no code, and they didn't ask any money for it because the only thing they needed is their own time. Yeah, so that's something. The other interesting thing was somebody came with an idea which has super evolved. This was a logistic engineer, and he was basically doing what Apple SAP was doing. So he was taking data from everywhere to optimize his entire logistic chain in Latin America. And when he was presenting that to the leadership team, the question say, but why are you not doing that in SAP? And the answer was mind-blowing. The answer was, Thierry, I've asked that to be on the project list for the last 5 years. It always dropped off the list. I can't wait anymore because I want to do a good job and I need to optimize my supply chain. So I developed it myself. So what was interesting, global project will take in multinational years to reach the last site. Does that mean that the site needs to suffer another 10 years until they come into the priority? Or could that type of application be the bridge, the interim solution until, a global tool is rolled out, which usually takes years? And the answer is yes. And then all the people say, yeah, this is good. Another interesting thing which came, it was the air freight app. We call it the air freight app. It was a whole mess to decide whether we would allow pay for goods to be shipped by airplane. Sometimes it's because we are late and it's a very important customer. Sometimes it's because the customer wants it to be shipped very, very quickly because of whatever reason. And this was all manual and very complex process. Email. They just created an app which is now used worldwide, where basically all air freight decisions are taken globally with this app. What's interesting, this app was developed in this low code, no code, and then the next evolution said, okay, let's make it more robust. Yeah, so that was developed by one guy. One guy developed it for one specific market, which was, I think China, I don't remember, and then say, okay, if we want to use it globally, let's make it more solid. Yeah, let's use perhaps a different application that the Microsoft Power Platform. Let's use our Mendix application to make it clean and neat. But the IDs and the prototype, everything, and then we just had to make it a bit more solid and then also support it, because this is becoming a critical application. So that's the type of thing I could see happening. So 3 different things: local, little things, which can be, valid for every site. If you have 150 sites, you could create 150 of this, safety ID box application, things which is bridging the gap between the big application coming, but it takes time to roll that out in 150 location, or application which suddenly becomes global because people say, wow, that's a cool application. Why don't we only do that for Brazil? We could do that for entire LATAM. And oh, why do we only for LATAM? We could do that for the entire world.
Thank you, Thierry. That's a really a real perspective that opened up for me as well, to see like how much you can unleash potential when there's clear, explicit contracting from a leadership standpoint, and a real invitation for people to step into something that has safety, that is supported, and has visibility within it. So thank you for that share. And as we close, we are about to wrap up. We have 2 minutes left. I would love to ask you one question, Thierry, and it is, what would be your advice to anyone who's in this session or who will be hearing the recording later on? What would be your advice in terms of moving the needle for digital change in their organizations, as we are now, in the whole complexity of AI, ChatGPT, and all of this talks right now? What would be your advice for people?
My many advice, but if there is one I would put forward, is having a multi-layer approach. You cannot afford forgetting one of the 3 layers. And by 3 layers, I always look as senior leaders, middle management, and the bottom, the employees. Your program needs to tackle the 3 layers. If you don't, you're not going to harvest, as much as you can. You might be successful over time, or you might you might have to stop. So really taking into account, you need these 3 layers, whether you like it or not. You need to have a story for the senior leaders. You need to have a story for the middle management, because they at the end, say, yeah, you can go and help. And you need to have a story for the employee themselves. And the story are different. So you need to have and prepare for the 3 layers. And usually that's what I do, and forgetting one, because I did in the past, is not good. Forgetting one is just creating trouble for you in the future.
Thank you, Thierry, for that profound advice, and I hope that we all had we had all a glimpse of the transformation that is going on at TSM. Thank you for sharing so openly with us and with the community.
You're welcome. Happy to be part of this adventure and to have my little contribution to the movement to a more, people-oriented organization.
Yeah, and I really hope that you also get some energy back from Teal around the world in terms of the next steps in your transformation. Thank you, everyone, for joining this session. I hope you walk away with amazing insights that you can really practice in your day-to-day in your own respective group. And with that, I actually would love to invite some of you. You can stay here for the next session, or you can also visit the other sessions. So you can see in the chat, I'm actually just pasting all the links for the different sessions. Feel free to click them and go over and join. Or stay here. And I hand over to NC, who will be facilitating the next session on this room. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, Rhea.
See you around. Bye.